Welcome to Mastery Fractional CFO's Punchy podcast, short, impactful podcasts where we speak with business leaders from all walks of life and talk to them about their business. Today I've got with me Randall Craig. Randall is an advisor on business growth, marketing strategy, thought leadership, and digital. He's an author. He's the CEO at Braintrust Professional Institute, and he's a Hall of Fame business speaker. So Randall, welcome to the show.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome. And Randall, the way I like to begin on these podcasts is to ask you to put in your words who you are and what you do. Tell us about your business and how you can potentially help other people.
Wonderful. Thank you. The Braintrust Professional Institute helps entrepreneurial leaders figure out how to scale their business to the next level. And we do that through multiple different types of activities. Coaching for the C-levels, retreats for the management team, continuing professional development for all staff, keynotes at kickoffs, management training, business development training, and various other training offerings. So that's the whole picture. The short version is a lot of my personal time is working one-on-one with CEOs, helping them figure out how to get to that next level. You know, helping them answer the question of, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. Then helping develop an alignment within the organization so you've got everybody going in the same direction and effectively unleashing the innovation and the creativity and the collaboration and all the other good words that we always talk about when we think about a healthy and growing business.
How did you get into this, Randall?
Well, that's a long story, but let's make it punchy. I started my career as a management consultant at KPMG. I was doing some mergers and acquisitions, then marketing strategy. Then my big career break came when I decided to leave the firm to go back to school to become a lawyer, which I did not become. The vice chairman of the firm called me up and says, "Randall, do you want to be my early morning assistant? I hear you're going to be leaving us to go to law school." And I said, "Oh, what's that mean?" He says, "Well, for the next 6 months before you leave, you come and you join me at 5:30 in the morning at my desk, and we just talk for like 3 hours, 4 hours until 9 a.m. And between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., you do your job and I do my job." And I thought, okay, this sounds a lot more interesting than being a spreadsheet jockey all day. So I did that. And it was very hard to be at my desk and at his office. And the first 3.5 hours every single day, he would pound me with questions. We're thinking of opening a business in this area. Here's the business plan. Let's talk through what it means. Okay, what are the pros? What are the cons? Okay, next. I've got a dispute between two partners. Here are the issues on the table. We've got to address it. Give me 3 alternatives. Okay, next. And it went on and on and on and on for every single morning for 6 months. And at that point, I realized that I actually knew something. And this was something that was very exciting to me, helping solve these kinds of problems. I eventually stayed at KPMG. I was a senior manager in the marketing department. I was responsible for developing the marketing strategy for a number of their different business lines. And service marketing is very different than product marketing. Even product marketers have got a service wrapper on it, if you will. But I did very well. I decided at the very end that I was going to start my own firm. I could always grow it and merge back in. So I started a company, grew it, sold it to an American public company. I was a senior executive there, eventually sold, left there, started writing books, started another company, sold that to several years ago, just a couple of years ago. In the meantime, my books were doing relatively well, but you don't make any money writing books, but it seems that people ask you, how do you people pay you to talk about your expertise, which, by the way, is in the book. So at that point, I started speaking at conferences and to corporate groups about how to apply certain business growth frameworks that would actually help unblock, if you will, or provide a new way of thinking about how to actually grow. And that's kind of where I came to where I am today, which is the question of not just, here are some frameworks in terms of how you can grow, but, I said it before, leaders know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know. So if I'm able to provide some of that information, some of that perspective at the most senior level, then that can offer, most leaders, if you say to them, have you thought of it this particular way? Or here's a question, they would say, oh, I got it. And then they could figure out how to actually execute. Okay, they may need some advice along the way, but they probably will get it if they know what the questions are. So sure. Fine, I'm doing this coaching, I'm doing this speaking, but there's a problem in the sense that there's an entire middle of an organization, there's the frontline organization. How do you build alignment? How do you build alignment with the senior leadership team, right? And that's really what the Braintrust Professional Institute is all about, is helping solve those problems, one business at a time. And
Okay.
it's a lot of fun because for me, I get a chance to interact. I'm sure, Ryan, is the same with you as a fractional CFO. You get to interact with all kinds of amazing entrepreneurs, amazing business ideas. And let's be clear, I don't know much about oil and gas, so those are not my clients. I don't know that much about, I don't know, retail. Okay, so those are not my clients. But typically, my clients are organizations that are service or knowledge focused. Okay, anything from professional services to to agencies, to financial services, anything that has got a knowledge or service component. That's kind of where the sweet spot is.
So let me ask you a little bit more about that sweet spot, your ideal client profile or customer profile. What size company might that be? What's the geography? Where do they need to be? Is there something specific that fits into that sweet spot aside from just being the kind of business you mentioned?
Well, I'm based in Canada, but I've got a visa to work anywhere in the United States. Interestingly, from a geographical perspective, anywhere in North America is great. Coaching, that actually happens, via Zoom. It doesn't really matter where, right? My ideal client profile is actually two different types, and I sort of straddle between the two of them. And there's a reason why I haven't said, okay, jump on this horse rather than this horse. One is the entrepreneur, okay, the person who's built something successfully to a certain level. That's so exciting to me because that leader can control everything, right? They're in charge of everything. They make the decisions. They may have a board. They may have a board of advisors, etc. But things happen, and things happen fast, right? And so that's one particular profile. The second profile is the larger enterprise. So, for example, I led a retreat, for example, just a few weeks ago, actually, for a North American agency where they brought in all of the senior management team from all over North America. Right, this is a decent sized organization. A month before that, I led a retreat for a global insurance company where all the business unit leaders all around the world got together. Right, and so how are you one or the other? Here's the thing: if these tools, techniques, processes work in a sophisticated, large organization, and these frameworks I'm talking about and processes, then they can work scaled down, and because they're battle tested in an entrepreneurial organization, right?
Yeah.
Except for it's much faster in the entrepreneurial organization. There aren't the million people. There isn't the crazy politics, etc. There isn't the complexity, different geographies, business lines, all kinds of leaders all over the place that have got to be brought along for the journey, but the frameworks and everything. So in a certain sense, the larger organizations are a bit of a lab, a proving lab for a lot of the ideas that I end up sharing, in my Braintrust work with the entrepreneurs. On the other hand, entrepreneurial leaders come up with the craziest ideas. And so when I'm working with some of the large organizations, like, why not think about it this way or that way? We think about where the disruptions come in. It's not from the large organizations. It's from the smaller, medium-sized organizations.
Okay.
So both of them are actually kind of cool. But once again, it's very narrowly defined. I don't work with, like I said, oil and gas or mining companies. I don't know anything about that. And I think the reason why this is an important thing, if you're a service-based organization that's large or small, you're still concerned about the customer or the client, right? The way you build up your cost structures, the way you build sustainable competitive differentiation, it's still kind of the same. From our perspective, we have, oh my God, over 1,100 pieces of IP, intellectual property, tools and templates and white papers and articles and videos, and the whole kit and caboodle. If I had to make a version of that for every single type of industry, all this stuff for retailers, all this stuff for, oil and gas and mining, all this stuff for government, there'd be no specificity.
Right.
It would be so generalized that it wouldn't actually be useful on the ground. And I think that's something that most people don't think about, the importance of saying, are you clear about how your ideal customer profile actually is?
What you're saying there makes a lot of sense. And so thanks for clarifying on that. Let me ask you this. Somebody's in the service business, they might be large or small, and they're wondering whether or not speaking with Randall might be a good idea. How would they know? What would they be looking for in terms of the way they are identifying their desire or need to be helped by Randall?
I think that's a good question that should be asked of every single potential partner, advisor that you actually have. So if you go to my randallcraig.com website under thought leadership, you can read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles that I've read that I've written on a particular topic. If, for example, if you go to Google and type in choosing a business growth speaker anywhere in the world, I come up number one. Sometimes there's a few ads on top of that, right? So there's a certain degree of reputation, but read the stuff. Yes, we could look at LinkedIn profiles, but how do we know how that advisor thinks? How do you know how I think? I'm an open book, right? Read all the stuff. Decide whether, in fact, I've got the background or not. So that's kind of like at that awareness kind of preference level. But before somebody actually buys the car, they take it for a test drive. So what I'll say for my coaching clients, prospective coaching clients, is this: I don't know if I can help you, but I'll tell you what, having all kinds of like marketing kind of conversations is a waste of your time. It's a waste of mine. So I'll say, hey, listen, let's spend an hour together. We'll do what I call an Ask Me Anything session. You can ask me anything with respect to the biggest challenges that are going on in your business today. What's keeping you up at night? What are the things that you haven't got to, or the ideas you just want to bounce some ideas on? It could be on technology or marketing or finance or exit or operations or you name whatever, people, you name whatever it is. Ask me the toughest questions. Put me on the hot seat. This is the Ask Me Anything session. And the only fine print, because there's no cost to that, the only fine print is this. At the end of the hour, you give me 2 minutes to ask 2 questions. Question number 1 is, during our time together, did I significantly move the needle on the issues that you brought up? Not, I gave you a couple ideas or we had a nice conversation, but really move the needle. And if the answer to that is yes, I'll ask the second question, which is, do you think it makes sense for us to spend some regular time together? Maybe doing a more deeper version of this that's focused on some of the deeper, more strategic and tactical issues that you're facing. And if the answer to that is yes, let's set up a meeting where I can talk about what that might look like. And by the way, Ryan, the short version is I'll meet with them for a couple hours at a time, once a month. They can call me as much as they like during the month if it's something that's urgent or strategic that really just can't wait. And they get access to all 1,100 plus pieces of our IP on an as-needed basis. You got a nice portal. We've got a few other things too. But that's what it is. And usually it takes about 4 weeks for them to sort of execute and sort of think through and decide how to sort of execute the things that we talked about during our time.
Sure.
So I think that kind of coaching, just talking about coaching, is the amazing way to give people a chance to say, yeah, I think this person can actually help. I've actually got something. I got a chance to test drive the car. I had a chance to taste the chocolate before buying the box, right? And I think that's the best way. For me, it's exciting because I get to learn about all these amazing businesses, meet all kinds of interesting people. But it's a lot better than anything else to give a prospective client the sense of whether, in fact, I can help them. And by the way, sometimes at the end of the hour, I say, I'm not so sure if I'm the right person to help. I think you're really looking for somebody who's like a CFO.
Yeah.
Like Ryan. Okay. Right. But, let's face it. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurial leaders about, how do you improve valuation when, how do you improve valuation prior to exit? That always comes up at some point, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So we have these conversations. We talk about how to make changes to business, et cetera. And when it comes to the actual conversations close to the exit, okay, I may be a CFA, but I'm not a CPA. I'm being a CFO or is not my jam, right? So that's where we say, okay, we've got to sort of find some help beyond just whoever's doing the day-to-day to actually help make that kind of thing happen, right? Or with respect to, say, cybersecurity, I can help in a certain way there, but at a certain point, we've got to bring somebody who's expert. Same thing with almost everything. There's people who are so specialized in all these different things. For me, my secret sauce is that I know how to wire it all together, right? And I've helped over 100 plus organizations, and you learn an awful lot about what doesn't work as well as what works. So that's what I bring to the table.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what a CEO's job is to get things wired together and to have somebody like you, an expert that you can call upon. That makes a lot of sense. And I like your approach as well. On that 1 hour conversation, you can really just take it for a test drive and get an idea of if it's going to work. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now I've got a question for you. So I'm going to just ask for a free sample. A lot of clients, a lot of companies out there, small or large, they're dealing with the question, how do I grow? There are different things that prevent growth. There's different things that can facilitate growth. If you're going to speak about growth for a moment, what would kickstart growth in an organization? What are some things that maybe you've come across? Just give us a taste and let our viewers understand one of the different things that they might do, or a couple of the different things they might do to get growing.
I think that's a great question, Ryan. Thank you. I'm going to give you two very, very different answers, though. Very, very different answers. Okay, number one is this. I think it's important to acknowledge for any business, the reason why it got to where it is because overall the leadership and everybody is doing the right things, right? Things are amazing, right? And sometimes it's too easy to say, no, you got to change everything, right? No, we want to build on that foundation. But sometimes the management team's not aligned. Sometimes you have the right people, the wrong people in the wrong spots. For example, in your particular area, if you've got a startup of two people, where one person's the financial person, one person's the operations, and one is is the sales, if you will. Somebody's got to do the financing. Then they decide to hire a bookkeeper. Then they grow. They're 10, 15 people. Now they've got a fractional operation for finance and accounting. And now they're 20, 50 people. They've got a full-time bookkeeper, right? And a part-time CFO. Then they grow to hundreds, etc. And now we need a CFO. Well, is that first accounting finance hire that you've got, even though you've grown, are they the right person at that higher level? For me, for example, the greatest example of this is I sit on a bunch of boards, and including one, by the way, that just went public. So I'm a public company director. And the question is the CFO that we had before, is that the right CFO for being a public company? And the answer is no. You've got to make sure that the CFO that you've got understands all the compliance and all the regulatory stuff, which is not something that a CFO of a private company, an excellent CFO of a private company, might have had in their bag of tricks. You can't take a simple course and magically understand all the regulatory and compliance issues. So every single role has got that kind of change. And so sometimes what happens is wrong people in the wrong spot. Very much the issue is there isn't alignment within the organization itself, right? What the leader is saying, what their team thinks, what the next layers down, if there are a next layer, what the front line, and everyone's thinking the same thing. Everyone's making assumptions that the direction they need to go is a different direction, and so we need to shake some of that kind of thing up and say, how do we get the same message appropriately hitting the same people? And that's what the Braintrust model actually is all about. And that sometimes even without making changes at people can drive significantly better decision making and growth. So that's one. The second answer to the question is, where are you getting the new information? Where how much are you investing, with respect to the new way of doing things or new inputs so that you can process it and make better decisions? Now, I don't know if many of our listeners are thinking about way back. In the 1960s, management education was massively changed because somebody came up with the concept of a framework. And in the marketing space, one of the most famous frameworks, which is still famous today, is called the 4P framework. So the theory goes that if you define price, product, place, and promotion, those four things, then the business will grow. Price, product, place, promo. However, that's the best thing since 1960s. And where are we right now? We're 2024, 2025, you might be listening to this. Do you think something has changed since then? So one of our frameworks is what we call the trust curve. The problem with 4Ps, there's no prospect or client in those 4Ps. It says nothing about making a decision. So for us, and this is an example, and we've got tons of these frameworks, before anybody makes a decision to purchase, to sign the contract, to do whatever the thing is, they've got to go through, in our view, 4 stages. Awareness, they have to know that they need the service, and they got to know who might be out there. Thinking about it, I got to ask you, Ryan, what kind of car do you drive right now?
You want me to Toyota
Yeah.
Highlander? Yeah,
Sorry?
Toyota Highlander.
A Toyota Highlander, which is a fine automobile. What was the car you were driving before then?
Some other Toyota. It's probably a Toyota Highlander version, whatever, earlier date.
Okay. So why did you get this new car? Remind me.
My wife makes all the car decisions.
That's fine. That's fine. I could ask the same thing about your current house, or how you choose a suit of clothes, or how you decide to hire somebody, but you're aware that you need a new car.
Right.
The old one's off a lease, or it's an old one, it needs lots of repairs, or you got kids, you want a big car, no kids, you want a sports car. Whatever it is, you are aware of, and you're aware of Toyota. You drove it before. You're aware of all the different ones, but why do you prefer Toyota? That's preference, awareness than preference.
Mhm.
You like Toyota because you drove it before, right? After preference, it's trial, test drive,
Mhm.
right? You don't just sort of say, "Oh, here's a big pot of money." You go into the dealership, and you want to drive it around the block, test drive, and then commitment. So if you think about those four stages: awareness, preference, trial, commitment, any decision that a business needs to make, particularly when it comes to actually selling. And by the way, an entire marketing strategy can be boiled down to simply, what are the awareness initiatives that you've got in your business? What are the preference initiatives that you've got? What are the things that you're doing to encourage trial? And what are the things that you've got in place to improve commitment, get people to actually sign the contract,
Mhm.
right? And so that's it. That's a far more useful and practical framework than 4Ps, right? Because people are moving as trust increases. You go from the awareness, preference, trial, and to commitment, and then eventually to loyalty and advocacy. But that's an example of gee, if you've got a business that's not going where it should, I bet maybe you're doing a lot of awareness. Everyone knows about you, but you don't get any people choose other people, right? You got to work on preference. What if you get everybody doing the trial? You're really good at that, but you can't close the deals. Okay, guess what? Let's look at the initiatives that you've got under trial, right? Under commitment, I should say.
Yeah.
So this is the example of a practical framework where, listen, Ryan, I just shared you the trust curve. You can go back to the mastery headquarters and say, what are we doing for awareness? What are we doing for preference, trial, commitment? I don't want to say it this way. You don't need me. Okay. You've got the idea already, right? Well, maybe you do need me. Okay. We could brainstorm what that means. We could make sure that everyone in the organization, we could do a retreat. Okay. To have people brainstorm and buy into. We could embed that to strategy. How to use it with AI. Where does content fit in? Oh yeah, with technology, like where's marketing automation and CRM and all that kind of stuff fit in? So all of these kinds of questions, which are kind of cool, are new ways of looking at growing your business that sometimes people who've been successful in the business, they're not aware of. And it's very, very easy to actually make them aware of it just through those conversations or through, any of the other Braintrust things that we do.
For sure. There's a lot of value in that. I understand what you're saying there. The whole sales cycle, the prospect to conversion cycle, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of CEOs understand what that is. But when you're a CEO, when you're running a business, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're running a large company, you can't look at every individual aspect of your business and focus on that. You need to bring in experts, sometimes from the outside, who can help your team get aligned around some concepts. You can strengthen your understanding and your model. You're talking about a framework. You can strengthen that framework and get significantly better results. It can drive better results, not just on the business development side alone, but on the bottom line of your financial statements.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, frankly, the beauty of this is that once an organization has built this into their culture, it becomes an awful lot easier to actually introduce more things, and then more things, and then more things.
Right. Continuous improvement and development and growth and evolution. So, okay. Well, I love that, Randall. That's a great answer. So we've reached the point in the podcast where I give you the opportunity to ask me, a fractional CFO, any question regarding business. I'll be happy to give you an answer. It doesn't have to be complicated, but over to you. What do you have for me?
So half the time, half of your time, I suspect, is just doing the CFO stuff. But when you think about onboarding a new client that's a mess and the client does not realize that it's a mess, how do you actually what questions do you ask of the prospective client to not disrespect all the work that they've done in the past, but actually have them be aware of what they're missing by actually having a real CFO, on a fractional basis, actually do the work.
Every client's different. And when we are engaging with a brand new client, we can pretty readily see what's missing and what's not missing. We can look at the best practices or the process.
But before, let's talk about before they've signed the contract. You're in the midst of convincing them that indeed you and your team are the right ones. But
Okay.
they don't. They think they're okay. They've got the junior accountant or bookkeeper doing their thing. What is it that you can say to say, well, 1 second here, at your size, you need this and why?
It's a combination of outlining for them that they are here, wherever that is, they are here. And in the process of talking to them, we try to understand, hey, where do you want to be on the map of business goals? What is your target? And if you're not there yet, why not? Why are we speaking in the first place is one of the questions I'll ask. But if you think that you might need something to go from where you're at to where you are, then we can talk about that. And honestly, part of it is drawing attention to that gap and making them aware of it, that there is a gap. And then also trying to fill in the blanks for them. Because a lot of times when people come to us, they don't know what they need. Like you had said, they don't know what they don't know. And so there is a consultative portion of that where we can outline, this is what we do for clients. These are the pieces that we can fill in so we can leverage your time. We can leverage your expertise. We can help you build processes in your accounting and finance function that are going to make things more streamlined for you, more effective, more compliant with government regulations. In the beginning, that's often the focus. But then once we get to that point of being compliant with government regulations and having good processes in place, we can begin looking at the future and really driving the results on the financial side so that you move from where you are to where you want to be. So we create a roadmap to success, so to speak. It's a bit of a project plan, if you will. But not unlike what you're talking about, we need to align the finance function with the rest of the business. And if there's a variety of stakeholders, it's very important that we get them involved in understanding what we're doing and why. So we're generally trying to translate the strategy that they've got or the vision that they've got into numbers. We build budgets, we put together different key performance indicators that we're going to be looking at, and we analyze the steps along the path to hit their financial targets. And that might involve business development. How are we going to grow? How are we going to get more clients? It might involve reducing churn. How are we going to make sure we don't lose clients? It might involve operational efficiency. It might involve any number of different things. But ultimately, it's what happens on the operations and sales side or business development side that impacts the financial statements. And so to get them to realize that we can fit in and become a part of their decision-making process and provide that financial framework and the guardrails to make sure they don't get in trouble with cash flow and things like that, that's where once they start thinking about that, it rings true. Most people we're dealing with, whether they're relatively small companies or large companies, they understand if they're missing that. Once you start talking to them about it, often before they speak with us, they'll have a bookkeeper, like you talked about, they'll have a tax accountant, but they realize there's no management accounting. There's no regular ongoing financial planning and analysis, executive level leadership on the financial side. And so they can recognize, that's what I'm missing. And so that's where we go with that.
Where I think that's particularly important is when somebody decides that an exit in the next 2 or 3 years is something that's important. And the thing that's a big surprise, certainly for a lot of my clients, is that little bugaboo called buyer due diligence. And for people who are listening who don't know about it, if you're selling your business at a certain point, the buyer gets to look at the books and all the contracts and all the other things. And it takes a boatload of time, not just to put all that together, which sort of speaks to the need of a real CFO anyway, but it takes a boatload of time. And that time is spent for you, if you don't have a fractional CFO or a full-time CFO, in the nights and the weekends trying to answer these questions that frankly a professional should. So I totally get what you're saying. Can we debate something though, Ryan? Can we debate something?
Yes, of course.
So I know how I answer it. Okay. And you're not just a CFO, you're a little bit more of a generalist. I'm clearly, a CEO kind of generalist and everything, but for the purpose, you're going to be the narrow CFO, and I'm going to be the narrow chief marketing officer. And unfortunately, in this hypothetical case, there's been some problems in the economy. And it's very clear that there needs to be cuts in the company one way or the other. We got to conserve cash. And so the CEO comes to both of us and says, what's the recommendations, etc. And you as a CFO, which I'm sure this is not what you'd say, but let's just pretend. You as a CFO say, well, we should cut all of our expenses by 10%. If we're able to do that, we'll be able to hit our financial targets. And that way, everything will be fine. And me as a CMO in my very narrow CMO world, I would say, well, actually, if the problem is reduced sales, we need to actually double our marketing budget, not cut it by 10%. Otherwise, we're just never going to get out of this hole. Okay. So here we are with this debate. Okay. That's the setup. So how would you deal with that kind of very common conversation that happens when the economy is a bit iffy?
To have that conversation, I generally don't take a very narrow view. So
No, nor I.
But to have that conversation, what we want to look at, often I'll look at scenario analyses. So we can take one, let's put together a budget, a forecast using what the CMO has in mind. Let's put a forecast using what the cuts situation looks like. And then let's talk about, is it possible to bridge the gap? I mean, here's the thing. When you've got it, when you're the CEO, you ultimately want to have robust dialogue regarding these kinds of issues. But you do need to understand that different decisions that you make now are going to have an impact on your financial statements. You cannot just cut costs in isolation. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. That has an impact on what the CMO is going to try to do. You're going to be cutting advertising potentially. That might reduce your sales unless you have another strategy to maintain the sales or bolster the sales or reduce churn or something. So it's a big conversation, honestly, Randall, and I don't think there's an easy way to debate that because I believe fully that it's what happens in the rest of the business that is going to impact what happens on the bottom line. And the costs are only one component of what calculates to be the bottom line.
I totally agree.
Yeah, so it's...
So what I would say to that is this. Number one, I'll take something from the Ryan School of leadership, which is it's the conversation that matters.
Yeah.
And I'll also say that sometimes there's some laziness amongst leadership roles. So when the CFO says the plan is to cut 10% everywhere, okay, and the CMO says, no, actually, we need to double it. My question would be, okay, how might we actually get the same sales or increase sales actually with less dollars? Are there cheap and cheerful ways of doing this? What's the marginal sales increase for every dollar we add or every dollar we take away from? Is there a step function in here? And let's not be lazy and just sort of say we're going to do something blindly one way or the other, but maybe a tough economy is a great opportunity to take a look at doing things in a different way. Maybe we didn't have a good channel strategy and we've got to walk down that road. And if it wasn't a tough economy, we wouldn't have looked there, right? And I think that the conversation is what starts it. But, lazy CMOs and lazy CFOs, it's not that they're lazy. It's just that they're comfortable doing things in a particular way. And when we make a change, sometimes it makes people uncomfortable, right? So I love your answer. I love mine too, right? But it speaks to why there's all these different roles and the importance of the CEO's role to make sure that those conversations actually get fostered, right?
Agreed, Randall. And I'll say this too. If you don't have those robust conversations and you're not analyzing things in the way that both of us are describing, that could have a profound difference in terms of where you end up next year at this time. It's very valuable to have those discussions. We're not talking about a 10% difference or even a 20% difference. In some cases, we're talking about being successful and hitting goals and going out of business. It's not always that dramatic. And you can always have a rolling forecast where every month you reanalyze and readjust. You don't have to be locked in for a year or anything like that. But the healthy, robust dialogue will make a business better. And bringing in outside experts like yourself, like a fractional CFO, if you don't have one, is in a lot of cases, it's a no-brainer. The return on investment far outweighs the cost. But you've got to decide if you're a business owner when you're ready for that. And it's not always today. Sometimes it'll be a few months from now or a year from now. But we're out there and we can help your business out. So I think we're pretty much near the close of this podcast, Randall, but you've been an awesome guest with some interesting ideas. Thank you for joining us. I want to just Yeah, I want to just reach out to our viewers and say, by all means, if you found this interesting and you think that there's somebody who may benefit from it, please share it with them. And just lastly, before I let you go, Randall, what's the best way for anybody who's viewing or listening to this podcast to reach out and find you? Is there a place you recommend they go first, whether it be LinkedIn or a website or anything like that?
Well, obviously connect with me on LinkedIn and reference this podcast. But if you want to get a sense of how I think, go to my two websites, braintrustprofessionalinstitute.com, braintrustprofessionalinstitute.com, and randallcraig.com, randallcraig.com. On that one, you'll see tons and tons of articles and resources that might be helpful. And the Braintrust site, we've got some fascinating interviews on business growth. You get a sense of all the specific things we can do to help.
Excellent. Well, that's it for our podcast today. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye, all.